Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here, despite having like the worst possible circumstances in terms of the weather. And a big thank you to Eddie and Claire and the whole team who have done an amazing job in keeping everything above water and ensuring we're having a good experience. So thank you, everyone. My name is Sevi Spanoudi. I have an artist management agency. It's called Black Major. Predominantly, we focus on management. We also have a label, publishing, event side. I've been working in South Africa for the past 20 years. Yes, that's me. And worked with some, I suppose, of this country's most amazing artists, Abdullah Ibrahim, Ray Piri, Simpi Wedana, Freshly Ground. Currently, we're managing DJ Lag, Shoma Jozi, Bongiziwe Mabandla, and. So, yeah, I'm very passionate about my work and very passionate about the subject of artist development. So I'm going to introduce you to my panel, and then we're going to go into some of the topics that make us all very, I suppose, excited in the space of development. And starting with Blaise, who is our guest. I suppose you're our guest, or your surprise guest. Yes.
Surprise for me too.
Thank you for joining us. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do, where you're based, your South African experience so far, and introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, everybody. My name is Blaise Janichon. I'm from South Africa. I worked in the industry here for 20 years, predominantly on the live side. Ran a venue in Cape Town called the Assembly for many years, and worked as the entertainment manager for Rocking the Daisies and the Seed brand. Recently I've moved to the Netherlands, and I've been there now for 3 years, and I've set up an agency called The Good Times Co. And we focus on artist management, bookings. We have a label side now too, and event concepts. Our focus with our artists is giving African artists more access and more opportunity in the European sphere. Yeah.
So Blaise, okay, we'll go into the questions afterwards. Patricia, next.
Hi everyone, my name is Patricia Wachira, not Chira, Wachira, from Nairobi, Kenya. I work for Perform Music Incubator as a communications lead. I did about 12 years in the advertising and marketing corporate side of it before I switched into the creative arts and music. So ideally what I do is gonna sound cliche, but ideally we give the brand stories. Whether it's the artist, whether it's a corporate, whether it's a sponsor, that's what I do. Yeah, that's it.
And our Fosta.
Hi guys, my name is Tulani Hedman, but also known as DJ Fosta. And I'm one of the founding members of Bridges for Music South Africa, and we also run an academy back in Cape Town, which is mostly focused on music production, entrepreneurship, and mindfulness as well. Yeah, and we've been in existence since 2012.
So basically what you get, I suppose, from this panel is people who are involved in different stages of development, starting with the very early stages, the school phase, incubation phase, artist label management phase, same with me, kind of across the board. So for the artists in the audience, regardless of your experience, I think there would be a lot of relevant points here. And we're going to cover some of that through our discussion, and then there'll be 10 minutes of questions at the end of the session. And I suppose if there's something that pops up immediately, you're also welcome to put your hand, and we can let you ask the question at that point. So I want us to keep very quick, but ask the question of what is the biggest challenge when it comes to artist development in your different spaces and territories. So we can start with Blaise.
Yeah, I think for me, being relatively new in the territory, also one of the biggest challenges is access. It's access and network. There's a lot of time spent making introductions, networking, developing what we're doing, and further to that, actually introducing the artists who are, most of the artists we work with are unknown to the entire industry in Europe. Secondly, and most obviously, finance. Yeah.
Are you finding that the work of introducing artists that are also, I get asked a lot of this question with Black Major. We have a lot of artists that are doing well internationally that are not doing as well at home. Do you find that are you able to introduce this artist on that side, even though some of them have not reached the point that they've had a certain level of success back in South Africa? Do you use the South African story as part of the introduction? Like, how does that work a little bit?
It depends from artist to artist. What we try and develop is the artist's unique story. And that naturally has context in South Africa, in the surroundings that they're from, but equally the artist story can be relevant for a European audience because they're looking for specific and different and interesting stories. Success in South Africa helps. Success in their home territory, wherever that might be, does help. But whether we're introducing an artist that's successful in their own territory or an artist that might not be, we're introducing them for the first time, and that's a new conversation.
Cool. Patricia, for you, like the first challenge?
I think one of the biggest, as she mentioned, as I mentioned, I work with an incubation where we focus on the industry as a whole. So in terms of the wheel, so you touch on the musician, you touch on the producers, the sound engineers, the artist manager. One of the biggest challenges we've faced and what actually brought up the incubator into ideation was the lack of understanding. Master your own craft and identify the gaps in your craft. You can be an amazing singer, but you can't do your own legal documents. You can't do your finance. You can't produce your event on your own. You need kind of a collaborative team that works towards it, because even if you get the financing, even if you get the exposure to everyone else, how will you sustain it if the foundation of it is not identifying what you're good at, what you're not good at, and who can work with you collaboratively and fill in the gaps of what you can't do as a musician or even as a producer.
So you would say, I suppose the challenge then is being able to build a team that understands the different roles within the ecosystem and dividing those roles according to person's strengths.
Exactly, with each person identifying what their strengths are and what their role is. You're able to let your event producer focus on the production of your events vis-a-vis managing you on a day-to-day. They can't be the ones running after you and seeing as an artist. They can't be the ones managing your day-to-day. And at the same time, they're the ones doing production of any of your events.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit about the program itself, because I think it's super interesting. It's not something I have been exposed to before. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how you divide the artistic side and the business side.
Okay.
And also the process that you go through, and also your numbers, because I think that was like a wow factor for me in terms of the your organization and the work you do.
Definitely. So Perform Music Incubator came into existence in 2019, before this. So before this whole mess we are all in. And it all started with our founder, who's a big artist back home, an award-winning artist, Modoni Drama Queen, identified that she managed to reach her pinnacle by DIYing. It was do it yourself. Like, you figure it out, it fails, oh, oops, let me try this on the next one. And the idea was, how do we change slowly, not that you're the ones who will be the savior of the industry, but how do we slowly change and evolve the Kenyan music industry? First step is identifying the different crafts that are needed in changing it, yeah? So one of the things was identifying there's a musician, of course, there's the artist manager, event producer, there's a sound engineer, there's a publicist, yeah? And it was, one of the things we also wanted to do was lighting, but because of how expensive and hard it is to find even the crafts, people who are, what's what I'm looking for, specialized in lighting, was a bit hard back home. You had to keep bringing guys from outside. So the program was created in a way we ran for 11 weeks, and everything is centered around an artist. So if we identify 6 artists, the team we build around, it's each of those disciplines that I've mentioned. So you create a team around the artist. And it touches on two things. So first, artistic development and the business side. So the artistic development allows the producer, sound engineer, and the musician to work on their craft. You'll find there people who can sing really well but don't know how to do stage performances. You'll find a sound engineer who doesn't know how to do live shows. Similarly with the producer identifying who they want to work with and how. So when it comes to the artistic side of it, the program runs for 11 weeks. Let me start by saying that. It runs for 11 weeks. We identify by doing a call out to people specifically in the individual disciplines, and you must have some baseline experience. It can't be we are teaching you from scratch how to be a sound engineer. If you're a musician, you have maybe 2-3 songs out, not necessarily an album, but you have some work out.
And you said you had 400 applications
In the
for the
third
second
cohort.
year,
Yeah, for the second year.
second year of the
Second year, the
program,
third cohort.
which I think is amazing. Kind of shows how the first year worked and the results and kind of the inspiration it must created within the industry. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty significant. Yeah.
Quite. So
Yeah.
the artistic side of it, what we do is for the 11 weeks, each of the people, like the events guys, they work towards producing an event. So it's a showcase. So the musicians and the sound engineers work together during rehearsals, to kind of showcase the music that they've worked on. Similarly with the producers, the publicists do the management of the gig in terms of inviting the media, pushing the narrative out there. When it comes to the business side of it, the outcome is they do a strategy, again, focused around the producer, sound engineer, and the musician. And it's a 6 to 12 months post-program kind of strategy. So if the end game is the artist wants to release an album, what are the steps that need to go into that? And it touches also on funding, which is very important. It touches on...
Which we're going to talk about in a second.
It touches on funding. It touches on the kind of work they want to put out, the brand they want to build, because I know we'll touch on that as well. The kind of brand the artist or the producer wants to put out, the collaborations that they kind of foresee that will work within their brand. So that's the kind of program we run. We've done 3 cohorts. The first one, unfortunately, that's when COVID started. So we had to put a break in 2019 and come back with 2 cohorts in this 2021. Sorry, in 2020, then 2 cohorts in 2021.
Yeah. And then Fosta, your side of challenge?
Well, firstly, it's most of the artists, they kind of lack the knowledge of the business side of the music, which becomes a very important part of their journey. Hence, like in our academy, we actually focus a lot on entrepreneurship, as our program is actually built around 3 pillars, which is sound, music production, entrepreneurship, and mindfulness. The second one would be getting the artist in the right state of mind, because we are dealing with artists that are coming from disadvantaged communities, and I mean almost everyone, of our co-creators have faced a challenge in their life, growing up. And we actually need to first talk about that and get that, to kind of get them in the right mental state.
I really love that about your program. And I think it is so important to kind of acknowledge that everybody comes through different circumstances and how that affects your way forward. I see with a lot of the artists we work with, and that varies across the board, that is kind of something that needs to be part of the very early day conversations, because everyone's background is different. That affects their ambition, possibly. That affects their potential to see what can come into the future. And it's good to, I mean, it would be great if you can talk a little bit more about that, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, Sevi. It's so funny because sometimes when you, when you get to kind of like get into that level where you talk about their mental well-being and their challenges, that actually helps them to understand who they are, which also adds up into their artistry as well, their image as an artist. I mean, I'll make an example of myself. Growing up, I come from a disadvantaged community of Langa, and I come...
Where the school is also based.
Yeah, where the school is actually based in Cape Town. So I come from a musical background family, the Ngogana brothers, my father being, my late father being a musician as well, pianist. So, I mean, I was quite exposed at a young age, through instruments and stuff. So I started playing I had access, as much as it's not the same as now, because back in the days, music was never understood as a career. So my mom never wanted me to be in the music industry. And even though my dad was a musician.
Well, maybe that's why.
Yeah, probably based on the challenges that they had faced. So, I mean, part of growing up and growing up in the disadvantaged communities and not having the right role models, I ended up getting caught up in the wrong side of things in life, and I ended up doing crime, and through that, I ended up in prison, getting sentenced. However, while I was in prison, that actually changed me, because that's when I started realizing that I was actually not on the right side. And I had this advantage, of being in the music family and already having played piano. And not everyone in my township was, had that opportunity. Hence, and I told myself that when I come out, I needed to change. And a lot of people don't know, but that's when I named myself Fosta, because I kind of felt I needed a new image, a new identity. And also I wanted to open my own label, a label that would represent Cape Town, that would be based in Cape Town, and kind of like do things on your own, because we were sick and tired of knocking to major labels, and we felt the industry was being monopolized. And yeah, we started the label and released some music. And funny enough, what we did, we kind of like did a crazy thing, because we firstly identified our market, and we felt that in Cape Town, there's like 5 universities, and in all those universities, 70% of the students are not Cape Townians. So at that time, we had platforms such as Mixit, the Bluetooth. We produced our music, put it on phones, went out to these high schools, started identifying groups of guys, started sharing the music for free. And come school holidays, everyone, when they had to go back to their cities, automatically they had published our music. So we kind of like created a demand. 2 months later, our song was on 5FM on Euphonics show, and he played it without knowing who the producers were, because the song was so a hit in the Cape Town streets and started boiling Eastern Cape and other provinces as well. And that worked quite well. And
it's a very different approach to what Patricia is talking about, which is like kind of delegate all the activities, and you're saying, no, hands-on, we're going out there doing it ourselves.
Yeah, well, we did delegate, because fortunately enough, my partners, my business partners, one of them was studying law and the other one was studying accounting. So when I came out, and there I was the music producer, and I was streetwise. I knew who to go to, so it was well planned. However, one thing that we didn't have, is PR. And so we did it in the guerrilla style, the streetwise style. I mean, I come from a generation of Kwaito, and I knew Kwaito was being sold out of boots of cars, and I was like, actually, we should go back, and do that. So sometimes it's very important to sit down and actually draw your equation of how you're going to do things, because that's what we actually did. And we started taking out major labels and all that, and we were left with the market. And then that's where we also started doing our own events.
And can I ask you something about, like, specifically exactly what you're saying into the Bridges for Music context? Do you find that you're focusing a lot in the business side of things with your students as an important kind of background education for the musicians themselves? Or do you follow a model of like, okay, you need to know the basics, but surround yourself with people? What kind of mentality do you try to build?
So we encourage a lot on collaboration. However, we feel that as an artist, it's very important to understand all these different disciplines. For instance, a lot of artists actually don't understand what their manager's work is. So you need, because remember, the manager is working for you. You are the boss. So a lot of artists.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah, a lot of artists don't understand that. So it's very as much as you're not going to be focusing on that, because as an artist you need to focus on your art, and have a great team. So we encourage a lot on identifying your team. It's very important. And we also encourage guys within the co-creators to actually start collaborating together, because we're not only focusing on artists as well. We've got guys that have passion on being artist managers, event coordinators as well. So we try and team them up, so that they could already at their early ages start creating a supply chain amongst themselves.
Thank you. So, Blaise, I have a question for you, which was aimed at Laurent, who's no longer at the panel, but applies totally in your case. We were discussing in the room back there that last year in the top 20 in South Africa, 14 artists were direct artists to distribution. So basically, artists who are not signing to major labels, but they're taking their music, setting up themselves as businesses and taking the music to distributors, where they're working with much better margins, like 90-10, 80-20. There's a lot more money for the artists. And yeah, I mean, it's a it definitely has been a huge shift. And in South Africa, those artists are really thriving. How you being a label, an independent label, working heavily on development, how do you think it's important to actually take that to a label instead of trying to do that alone as an artist, even though you might have those people in your team? How does the artist in a development phase benefit from the label environment, I suppose?
It's a good question, Sevi. And I think there's been a lot of conversation around the team already. And what we try and do as a label is just be another member of that team. We try and do a lot of work in guiding the artist on a strategic level, in helping the artist shape their music, get it ready for distribution.
From an A&R point of view, like musically, creatively?
Not so much creatively. We try and give them the tools and give them the guidance around the music. So, you know, we have masses of asset requirements, of lists and templates that can help the artist understand what tools they need beyond just, I've written a great song, you know, and
in the social media space, in the like mixes, Dolby Atmos, this, that, like, yeah.
Yeah, I know Wendy has a panel or has a workshop on metadata on Saturday, you know, and it's just about understanding the importance of getting that correct, understanding you could take a photo on your phone, put some text on, you know, with MS Word or whatever you're doing and use that as a cover, or you can actually think about the story you're trying to tell through the image. That's your cover, that's the first site, that's what you're going to use as your primary asset. You know, how far are you going to take that? Can you animate it? Can you do different renditions to build it up? You know, so I think the value that we add is in that space, in trying to position the artist for broader success, and also in using our network and our relationships to the benefit of each artist. An independent artist has their database, their audience, their community, and we have a broader community that we're able to speak to for each artist, or for all artists.
So a question that comes to mind again for you, because I get it also myself all the time, is people writing and saying, what do I need to do to get into your label or into your agency? Like, what is the criteria? And we all say, okay, like, it's not a checklist. In your case, knowing that you are, I suppose, also a fairly new label with certain capacity, what do you consider as important with an artist that doesn't have a previous history, like very early development, and for the artists in the audience, I suppose, who are in that position? What is important to, what boxes, important to tick?
No checklist, but boxes to tick. So I guess what I look for in an artist is a plan. I want to know that artist hasn't just made a song and thinks that song is going to go to #1, break their career, make them famous. There's got to be a commitment to work hard. There's got to be a commitment to us as a team member and an understanding of what we're trying to achieve together. There's ideally, which we work with our artists on a lot of the time, is a longer term plan. Great, you've made an EP, what's next? How are you going to use your community around you to grow your product, and to grow the life of you? Are you planning to perform live? What does that look like? Are you, as a producer, you might be making your music on your own, but you need a 6-piece band, and just trying to develop that understanding with the artist. But for us, it really is about the long term.
And does it scare you when somebody approaches you and their social media numbers are less than your own, for example. Like, you're like, okay, this person has 1,000 followers, like, what do we do? How do you feel about that? Just to interject there also myself, the first thing I do is I'll go to their Instagram, to an artist's Instagram, even though that has absolutely nothing to do with music, you know? Like, you could go to Spotify, Apple Music, but no, first thing is go to Instagram and see what are they doing in terms of their community and engagement, and are they talking to their audience, and have they found their audience? And sometimes that is not a good, often it's not a good indicator of two of my artists that are doing so extremely well, Bongeziwe Mabandla, DJ Lag, both of them have less than 50,000 followers, which is a very small number considering the success they have. So how do you look at that number and what goes on?
I generally get pretty excited when the numbers are low, actually.
Why?
Because all we can do is grow them together. You know?
Wow.
So,
yeah.
I think we work with a lot of artists that have substantially low numbers in what you're talking about, you know, and we also work with a lot of artists. We can't go to their Spotify or their Apple page because they don't have one yet. They haven't released music before. So if I do, and when I do look at their socials or I look at their whatever they've developed, and I will say I'll never go to Facebook because it's all over the place. But I think Instagram does create a good, has the potential to create a really strong identity. So it's a good starting point. And to see where the potential is to shape the identity.
So part of the development and starting together and going to the journey of growing something properly. Yeah. Fosta, you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess like this thing of social media, we also do it, you know, in our recruitment, and not because of the numbers, but it's kind of like you want to understand what type of a person this is, you know, and it helps us a lot, you know, before we can move forward.
Even though none of us is being absolutely honest about our lives or our communities, or, you know, it's interesting. Like,
Exactly. And that's the main reason why we actually look at that, you know, so that we can understand the type of person, so that by the time the program starts, you know, we help you
be that person.
Be original.
Yeah.
No, be original.
Patricia, I have a question. Oh, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to add on something. The necessity of also looking at that is you'll find when the artist or even the producer or sound engineer is building their brand, which is part of our business long-term plan, is you'll find, I think I mentioned it, someone will come and say, I'm this kind of person, like I represent my brand as the bad girl, instead they're a kind of girl next door. Instead of the girl next door kind of thing.
This was my question about, yes.
So if you look at someone's social media, someone is telling you, oh, my music is going to be bad girl, I'm going to be like Rihanna. You open their page, it's puppies, you know.
Kittens.
They're baking, kittens, nieces and nephews, and you're like, it's not matching. Who you've been presenting yourself to, because as much as, yes, social media can be a lie, it's kind of aligning to who you are at the core. Yeah, it's aligning to who you are.
You know, I've just been told we need to wrap this. I haven't even gone through like I don't know, I'm finding it fascinating myself, so I haven't even gone through half of it. But, okay, so we can maybe start taking some questions. Yes? Or does the mic need to get there? Okay.
So my question is around the whole exporting of talent, right? Because of somehow we are still revisiting a very colonial structure in terms of the art, where art in Africa is not valued, not because of the people who are not educated in it, but because of the education around the business of art, right? It's not public, you know? So already we are at a disadvantage. And that comes to a point at that's why Bongeziwe is not big, you know, but Bongeziwe has been doing a lot, you know?
Well, it depends what you define as big, and there is lots of indicators. We can discuss that, but there's a lot of indicators, so maybe...
But he built his own foundation before he met you guys.
He built... Well, we've worked together for 8 years, and 3 out of 4 of his albums, so I would disagree with that.
Well, okay,
yeah.
That's something else. Okay, that's something else. So with that being a part of your business, right? How are you going to deal with it that now South Africans cannot go to European festivals where most of our artists make money.
I totally disagree with you.
Yeah.
Completely. Okay, let me share my point of view. Yeah. I think it's the best time for music coming out of South Africa and from the continent. I feel like never before in the 20 years I've done this business have the doors been as open as they are now in terms of the rest of the world willing to spend money. And that is a big indicator of success. Like, where are your fees at? Are you able to pitch and get a position in a big slot? So I think it's a journey, 20 years. Beginning of that, I was with Freshly Ground. All the doors were closed. We were pitching. We were in a box, world music. You couldn't get the money, couldn't get, access, essentially. And I'm finding now, at least with my artists, all the doors are open. Like with DJ Lag, we're dropping an album in February. He's doing 2 international magazine covers. He's an underground artist from South Africa. He's in media all around the world. Like everywhere we pitched it, Rolling Stone, this, that, everybody has said yes. And it's because there's a huge excitement around what we're doing in the continent at the moment. And the fees are there too much as well. I'm finding my experience, but we can...
Yeah, I totally agree with Sevi as well. There's a lot of demand of African music, especially now. I think we are on the right time. The only problem is our African communities. There's not much of that support that the international market is showing to Africa. So we need more of our African communities to actually show that support and respect artistry of Africa.
Would you say it's the people who play the music?
I mean, even our governments, for an example. We should start there.
We said we wouldn't talk about government and funding and support. We promised each other that. Yeah, but I think it's worth looking at that perspective because it's very exciting and I think it's very hopeful for musicians to know that things are different and you can actually have a breakthrough internationally, like at this point in time, if you're coming from the continent. A lot easier, yeah. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Prince Ishiwana. My question is around investment models. Because I'm actually taking an artist to like a Southern African tour, Tanzania, Mozambique, Lesotho, so on and whatnot. And I've found it very difficult getting partnerships from other brands as an unknown entity because my artist, Patricia Wachira, is not really known across the country, but he's making a name for himself. That's how we got the Mozambique deal. That's how we got the Tanzania deal. It was through social media, people seeing his work and interacting with it. So that's my question. How do I maximize on partnerships and sponsorships for something like that, like a Southern African tour type thing? Thank you.
So I guess my first thought and question is what kind of brands are you approaching? Because if you're knocking on the same doors that everybody else is knocking on, and your artist is unknown, you're going to hit resistance. So it's really about assessing where your artist will resonate. I think there are more and more, I'm seeing more and more European funds that are investing in African talent in Africa. Not?
No, we had discussed it.
The funding.
The funding.
Apologies. We can talk about that afterwards then. But it's about I guess also looking at what similar artists are doing, where they're finding success, and making sure that your groundwork is done on your pitch. It's not a one-page photo of the artist saying, "Hey, look at our social media numbers." It's a thorough analysis of the artist, the potential, where you're going, why you're doing this tour, what this tour is going to represent in the artist's career for the longer term, and actually developing a deck out of it. Yeah.
Just to add a very quick point on that, I think music in Africa are also doing a fantastic job in terms of concentrating the information around all the calls for funding that are international mostly. So I think that's a very useful resource to keep looking at, because there are opportunities that are coming through that. And it's about, as Blaise saying, organizing the information properly and just get into a habit of putting good proposals together. Yeah. Stephanie?
Okay, it's not a question, but I want to add something as working from Germany in Europe, bringing African artists to Europe. Yes, we have this discussion all the time, you know, I need the success on the local market, in my home market, yet I feel I'm more appreciated overseas. But I feel it's not necessarily always guaranteed that you're a huge star in your country, that means immediately you have big touring possibilities in Europe. I mean, I have added some big cats from Angola to my rooster, and nobody would know them in Germany, you know, you'll still need to build. But you come with an outstanding story and an outstanding product. I think, you know, that is also a key point, what helps us to bring an artist overseas or to a territory, to make people curious. Like, here I'm working with Nomfusi, and we have managed to tour her since 10 years in Europe, and even in the beginning without even an album released, no support, nothing, just from her story, and it made people really curious, and it worked. So you really, as for artists, I can give you that tip, you know, make sure that your story is, you know, appealing, that your press kits are great, that you are offering a good product which is unique. It doesn't matter if you're a huge star in your territory or not. It doesn't always help, you know.
I agree 100% with that.
Sophie, can I add something?
Yeah, you want to go?
I just want to add something to what Blaise said about building your pitch deck. One of the key things I've identified, even on working on the corporate side, is you've mentioned that a lot of the guys were because of the social media presence. It's very key to build in your deck like the identity of who this audience are, because it goes beyond just who the artist is alone. It's who is interacting with him on those platforms, because the artist might come off as, let me not use the regular brands. I'm trying to find a brand that's relevant to, because I'm from a different market. So
Adidas.
You'll find like Adidas, right? But when you go and do an analytics of the audience that has been interacting with him on social media, it's so off Adidas that were you to get partnership with Adidas, it wouldn't do much for the brand with the guys who will end up showing up for his show. And I like that your artist is on social media, because there you're able to dive deeper in understanding who the audience is, and your numbers are legit. You're not speaking hypothetically of, I think I'll bring these guys. You actually have the stats with you. So you're able to build the brand and the narrative around actual figures and actual data that you've analyzed on your end. I think that's what I wanted to add on that, because that's very key in terms of the pitch deck you do for the different brands. Yeah.
I wanted to just add a point that is completely independent to what we've been discussing, but I think, like, also for the artists in the room, it's kind of a long journey, development, getting to who you are, getting to your music, getting to the relationships with the people in your ecosystem, getting to a level of success. Like, you can have a viral moment, and sometimes that's even more challenging, in my opinion. Like, you kind of shoot out there, and then you're up there, and what do you do? How do you stay at the top? How do you maintain a career that this is your life going forward? So I think just being prepared that this is a long journey, and every kind of step that you take needs to be with an intention of where do I want to get and what do I want to do. And then share that with the people around you and revise that every now and then, and kind of ensure, are these still the right people around me? Do I need to shift this, that? Yeah, but just give yourselves the time to get there, I suppose. Cool, we done, I think.
I got one. Hi.
Oh, Rashid.
Hi, my name is Rashid Lombard. This question is related to a paper that was presented this morning, Return to Play. And it's great to hear how the Artists of the Continent is being toured in Europe. It's very enthusiastic about it, and obviously one is very happy about it. But what's the protocol around COVID-19? Because here we're grappling with this. You know, we're looking at numbers, 500 indoors, to be certain size, 2,000 outdoors. And it'll just briefly, you know, because we also looking at what's the protocols with the protection of your audience, your paying customers, your crew, and your artists.
I can contribute something on that, and then maybe Blaise, who's based in Europe, can also continue on that point. I found basically we were extremely lucky to be able to tour 3 of our artists over this period, over the past 2 years. And I'm saying lucky because someone like Bongeziwe would play a show in Amsterdam, and then the Netherlands would close like a week later, and then he would go to the UK, and then he would close a week later. So we were very lucky. He managed to do 4 tours in Europe and the UK over the past 2 years. And it was a mission. Like, it was expensive. It was COVID tests every time you needed to cross a border. And it was very difficult. But for us, because he had released an album at the beginning of the lockdown, it was very important that he did that anyway. So it cost us a lot of money. It cost us a lot of time, a lot of commitment. Ended up working. He came back home safe. He got vaccinated on that side before the vaccine was available in South Africa. So I feel like we took a lot of precautions, but it was not easy on anyone. All the agents, like Stephanie, I suppose, it's a nightmare. Like, you move the date, then you move it again, then you move it again. And then with the rest of the artists, we kind of like made, I suppose, changes to the release plans. So they wouldn't have to drop an album, so they wouldn't have to tour during this period, and delayed everything from September now, 2021, through to next year. But again, you don't know. Like, today you saw the announcements, and yeah. So Blaise, on your side.
Yeah, I read something that I felt was appropriate this morning, which was like a yo-yo policy. And it feels like that's kind of how the protocols are operating at the moment. I mean, in the Netherlands, it's been very difficult. Even when it was more open in some other neighboring territories, the Netherlands was still quite closed down. We've had the Van Pletsen early B and Wawi show that we've moved now 4 times. It's a year and a half later. I managed to go to one of those Bongeziwe shows, and I was one of, I think, 20 people that were allowed in the venue that night. I've been to shows where we're sitting 1.5 meters apart in a seated show watching a psych rock band, and it's... So I think that there isn't a clear protocol, and we just are at the mercy of what the policymakers decide. I've got a lot of respect for what you've been trying to do here, and the little I know about it, to really try and build a solid plan to bring South Africa out of these challenges. I mean, as we're sitting here now, it's inevitably going to get tighter again, isn't it? So, yeah, I think we need to start looking at what it looks like in 3 years, not 6 months, not 2 weeks. Yeah.
And Rashid, can I ask you a question about that? Like, today when I was reading the BBC article, I got so angry with the language around South Africa and kind of being, like thrown under the bus in such a hectic way, and the language around it. And it made me really upset because the numbers in South Africa have been so much lower than what's been going on in the UK. And yeah, like this feeling of us, with DJ Lag, to play shows in the UK, he did twice quarantine of 14 days. Like, it's heavy going. And how, like, you obviously with your experience, politics, all of that, like, what do you think of the politics of all of that?
Well, one thing I said this morning, which is like quite weird, is that this virus brought us together. In fact, we've been recognized by the Department of Labor, the Department of Health, NEDLAC, who's the business body that only speak to business. So finally they realized that the creative industry is a business on its own. And that's across the genre, all aspects of the creative. But this morning also threw all of us back. I had to present a paper, 20 to 10, 8 o'clock this morning, we heard that the virus is in South Africa. And the next thing was that not only South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique, we're all on the red list. Now, fortunately, we're not so keen to go to the UK right now. But how it affects us is those people coming here, especially for summer. Yeah. So it's a bit of a shocker, and it actually put all our discussions like 10 foot back. Because are we going to go into lockdown because of that? We don't know how the powers, what positions they're going to take. But what's good is this line of communication now. They realize they can't do without us. Yeah. And unfortunately we have to bring in government, because they've got to start listening to us. I mean, if you look at the impact of the live music, or the music industry in South Africa, it's all gone now. It's millions, as you know. The unemployment rate, you know, the suicide rate. A lot of people don't know about it. Musicians are selling instruments, you know, and it's sad, but we're going to overcome. But what happened today, and we were expecting the fourth wave in December, it's predicted, because we also Cape Town working on December 16th. We managing someone's gig, and all of a sudden, it's like, I get a call this morning from my daughter to say, I think we will have to take less people, instead of 2,000, maybe 1,500, seated. How do you put seating on Green Market Squares, cobblestones? Not going to work. You know, and even if
and it's like dominoes, one thing after the next.
Yeah. So it's coming, and the fact there are now these new offices, COVID compliance offices, which is another line on your budget. You're trying to cut your budget. On the one hand, it's a new job created, because now you've got to have, besides your disaster management, COVID compliance officer. And I was telling a lot of the events, especially events managers, promoters, that we got to start learning what it means to be the whole Safety Act now. Because in the past, you just employ them. Now we got to understand it, because it's of the risk, and also just being part of the bigger picture.
Right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately,
we're
we're
done.
out of time. Yeah,
Wow.
we'll have to round up. So, a round of applause
Thank you,
for the panel.
everybody.
Sevi, thank you so much. Blaise, Patricia, Fosta, thank you guys so much for your time. To everyone here, thanks for your patience. A round of applause for yourselves.